Hello, and welcome back to Book Banter. Jen Craven is the author of upmarket women's fiction, where one decision changes everything. Her contemporary debut, Best Years of Your Life, published in August 2022. Her next novel is scheduled to release in September. She writes from northwestern Pennsylvania, where she lives with her family. Please welcome Jen to Book Banter.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me,
Hello.
Tanya.
Thanks for joining us. I'm very excited to talk about. So, first, I'm going to show everybody the cover because this is really a lovely historical fiction cover.
Thank you so much.
I love it. I love the blue. It really does pull you in, and the suitcase tells a
Yes,
lot.
as historical fiction books know, you've got to have some sort of woman figure on the cover.
You do.
Classic for the genre.
It really is. It really is, and I think it just sort of pulls us in, and we know, okay, that's
Exactly.
my kind of book.
You know what to expect.
Exactly. And I have read two of your novels now, in the recent, literally, like almost back to back.
Yeah.
I really enjoy your writing style.
Thank
It's
you.
lovely and easy to read. And All That Shines and Whispers is a historical fiction and coming of age. Um, it's set in Nazi era Europe. And I'm curious, how did you come up with that title? Because that's an interesting title.
Yeah, I think it really plays into the idea of not everything is always what it seems on the surface level. So you might have this family that's very like shiny and looks perfect and has all the prestige and the wealth and all of that kind of stuff. But then there's layers underneath and there could be secrets and things that people don't see on the outside. So those would be like the whispers behind the scenes. So it's like a contradiction, the shiny and the secrets.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
And it actually epitomizes the story very well. So good job. That's a good title.
thanks.
Titles are hard. I
Titles
find
are
titles.
super hard. That book actually had several titles as I was working on it, and usually I don't land on something that I keep until the very end most of the time
Really?
because I need to like see how the whole book goes, even if because I'm a plotter. So even though I have the whole thing kind of in my head and plotted, I don't know. I feel like till it's done, I can't give it like a definitive name. So I had a few working titles along the way.
I like that, actually. I like that freedom to change the title instead of getting locked in. I may borrow that.
Yeah, plus titles are just so hard, and
Yeah.
I'm not an indecisive person, but you want to make sure it fits the book. And so sometimes I'll run some title ideas past my critique partners, and that's really helpful too.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I should do every time I sit down to do a title, I think, yeah, that seems a little boring.
Yeah, I know it has to be like attention grabbing. It also has to make sense for the story and the genre. So they're
Mhm.
super tricky. And with so many books being published, like you could have a great idea, but it's been done or it's too similar
Yes,
to something else.
exactly. Yes, because there is no new ideas.
Right.
They've all been done before, so
Exactly.
that's a really good idea. Now, this story is deeply centered around family.
Hmm.
So, can you tell us what inspired the Weiss family as a whole? They're very interesting.
Well, it is loosely inspired by The Sound of Music. So if anyone that's listening is a Sound of Music
Ah,
fan, then you will find definite like nostalgia in this story. So for me, I adore the movie. It's my all-time favorite film. And so I always found myself wondering like what happens next after the film
yeah.
credits roll, after they climb the Alps to safety, spoiler alert. What happens next? And so
Yes.
that's kind of where the story picks up. And I reimagined some of these characters, gave them new identities, and just sort of went with it and said, like, okay, how could we give, them a little bit more longevity? And it primarily focuses on the oldest daughter of the family, and she's got some secrets and all of that. But as you said, it is a family story. So all the characters play a role to some degree. And, it's very much like a coming of age family drama.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so Carrie's just chimed in to tell us that you're amazing at titles.
Well, maybe that's because I send Carrie like a list of 15 and say, or more. And here's what I'm thinking of. And, but critique partners are very helpful.
That's for sure. You're going to be on speed dial now. Well, I'm so glad that you referenced The Sound of Music because I thought it was just me.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I didn't realize that you had set out to do it that way as
Yes, I
the
didn't
sort of
want it to be I didn't wanna say that, like, directly or in the cover or anything like that. That's why, like, the names are changed and all of
yeah.
that sort of stuff. But, in the acknowledgments at the end, I do sort of allude to, this story might have sounded familiar to you, and that's,
Oh,
intentional kind of thing.
I
So, if
wonder if
you're
I
not a
glossed
fan,
over
and
that.
if you're not a Sound of Music person, then you might not have made those connections. But if you are, then you clearly will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's what it was, except for the people were so different. They were different
right.
people, but they had
Yes.
similar characteristics, but they were so different, and that's actually one of the things that I thought was really well done was that, each member of the family is so unique, and they have their own defining characteristics, and it's a large cast.
Yes.
So
There was a small point in time when I was writing this book that I thought I was going to make it a series. And it's funny, you and I were just talking about
Oh,
series before
yeah.
we came on. And I'm not generally not a series writer and I don't really read a lot of series, but because the cast is so large, I was sort of like, I wonder if I
Yeah,
could do like a 3-book series on this
spin
family.
them off,
This one
yeah.
focuses on this one sibling or one of the children, and the next one focuses on this. And I had a few ideas, but
Yep.
then I got struck with my next idea, which was the next book, and, the rest is history, so
Yes, shiny red objects, they really
yes,
do pull.
exactly. But you never know.
You never
Someday down the
know.
road.
Isn't it funny? I think too, though, once you spend so much time with characters that become real,
Yeah.
inside our own heads, that you do need to also sort of separate from them
Yeah,
that
taking a
way.
break for sure. I mean, like I said, I've never written a series, but I would imagine doing a project in between could be really helpful. I mean, who knows?
Yes. I
I'm
think
sure
it's a
some of your
great
listeners can
idea.
speak to that.
I think it's a great idea. I feel like I'd like to do that right now.
Yeah. Yes.
So true. So that this is, more of a craft question, I guess. How did you approach creating such unique characters and keeping them straight and defined? Like, what I mean by that is when you read the book, you don't get lost in flipping back pages going, "Wait, who is that again?" Like that
Yeah.
the connections were very clear, and
Well, I
that's
think
not always
because
the case.
I think because I used The Sound of Music as inspiration, some of that groundwork was there. And even though the characters are different, I still pulled some of those, I don't know, maybe personalities or connections within the families. So for me, they were very clear in my head, and I'm glad to hear that that did translate.
It did. Yeah,
I think
yeah, it
some
really
of the
did.
siblings definitely had a stronger or more in-depth role than others, and that's okay. Some of them needed more
Age
page
kinda
space.
dictated that though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I mean,
yeah,
it's a coming of age story, so of course the younger children are just sort of like there in the background, but they all play their role, and it's just tricky. Like, but I'm a
yeah.
plotter, so I had like my lists of each character and what their personalities were like and their characteristics and physical and in their heads and hobbies and all
Okay.
sorts of stuff.
So you had it all
Yep.
at the
So I
because
could
I
reference.
have I don't know if you I forget what color eyes or hair somebody had because it's just in my head. So it's
Exactly. I know.
yeah, documenting is crucial.
Yes.
It helps. It does. I have to say too that one of my favorite parts of the novel was the pacing. I'm an average reader, which means that I'm probably slower than most people. Uh, and I sped through it. So I'm I kind of have it's a difficult question because I'm like, how did you insert all of the detail and all of the setting to make me know exactly how the layout of the house was, how the town looked, how the shops looked, how the Alps looked,
Mhm.
everything. And yet I kept flipping pages. Like that's a hard balance.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me as a writer, I try to write in the way that I like to read, which is a pretty quick pace. Generally, my chapters are pretty short, and I leave a lot of them with a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end. Not every single chapter, but sprinkled throughout. And that keeps the momentum going and the tension, and you want to keep turning the pages. But so I do that in most of my books. But I think it was just sort of like giving enough description to picture something, but not drowning you in it. I didn't want to like
Yeah.
spend a whole page talking about the town or, whatever. And I have nothing against that. Like there's certainly books who
Yes.
are very, very descriptive and all of that. But I think sometimes for me, less is more, and I'm a little bit more plot heavy than description heavy.
That makes sense. But there's something about the way that you put in those significant details that allow the reader to form a complete picture. And I'm not at all sure how you do that
Well,
without
I'm not sure that
using
I'm sure
words.
either. I'm not sure that I'm sure either, but I'm glad that it works, and I'm glad that it worked in this book too.
It's interesting because it did work in your contemporary novel as well. So it's something that you do that is really interesting. And I was curious, like, how do you do that? But without, because you don't want to, give readers a whole info dump on
Right.
everything that you researched. It usually ends up being like one line, of
Yes.
5 books you've read. So
Yeah, and this one did take a lot of research. Even though I might have had the storyline in my head, I had to look at maps and see where like country
yeah,
borders were and, the
then in
location of the
the moment,
mountains and,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And for that time period, what the cities were
Yeah.
like. And so, I don't have a clear cut answer for you, but I'm glad that it's
Interesting.
working.
It is. It really is. It's so okay. Let's try it this way then. What does your creative process look like from beginning to end? Maybe there's an
Yeah.
element there that.
I usually get the idea for the plot first, like the inciting incident usually comes to me fairly quickly. That would be like the what happens. And usually in my books, there's some sort of split second decision that the protagonist makes that then has a rippling of consequences. And so that split second decision usually comes to me first. And then I'll frame the story around it and think of like, well, what type of person would do this, or who are these characters, and what are the supporting characters and all of that kind of stuff. So I know some people, they get their characters first, but for me, it's very much like the plot. And then I work out from there. And I am a plotter, so I usually am bullet pointing or making post-it notes if it's multi-POV and mapping
Mhm.
everything out. So I like to have a very clear vision of where the story's going.
Okay. You know what's interesting when you say that? Your multiple points of view is really interesting because that was another thing that I was like, wow, you really seamlessly nailed that because you didn't change the point of view as per each chapter or anything. It was by paragraph. And so
Yes, in
sometimes
this one. Mhm.
you'd be in mother's head, sometimes you'd be in a daughter's head, sometimes you'd be in father's head. And but yet you, as a reader, you always knew where you were. Like
Yeah, so this one, it
you must
was
be
a little bit more
excellent
of
at giving
that.
directions.
What's that?
You must be excellent at giving directions.
I don't know. But yeah, I tried to kind of like weave it in seamlessly without doing like that chapter break, which you
Yeah.
see a lot more with multi POV. And then
Mhm.
my contemporary story, my contemporary book was every chapter was a
Yeah.
different
More
narrator.
quick.
So
Yeah.
there's just so many different
Interesting.
techniques you can do. And I feel like each story, you just kind of figure out how it
Yeah.
needs to be told.
So true. So true. And it's so often it does tell you, it
Hmm.
shouts it. It shouts it from the screen.
Yep.
And Kate is saying that it sounds like her kind of book. And I would agree, Kate, it is absolutely your kind of book because I know what Kate reads.
Nice. Yay. Well, hopefully she'll check it out.
So the locations, again, like the Alps and
Mhm.
everything like that. Did you travel to research, or was it like Google or?
No, this was like researched from Northwestern Pennsylvania.
Wow, that's
So
impressive.
my husband went to over to Germany and Austria when he was in college. So, but that was
Ah,
a while ago, and he was a student and that kind of stuff. So, but I asked him a few questions. I also have my grandmother's husband who lived for many years in Germany. So I talked with him, and he would have been in that sort of demographic too, at
mhm.
that, with
Nice.
his age and everything. So he was a really good resource for even small questions like what type of schooling would the kids have had, and because it's different from here in the States,
Yes,
and they don't call it this, they call
yes.
it that. So just like even some like vocabulary. Otherwise, it was good old Google
Hmm,
research and just
interesting.
fact checking and taking my time.
Did it take was the research a long time of the process for you?
Not too terribly, because again, I do think that my stories are very like plot driven. So it was
Mhm.
more along like what is the character doing versus all the outside stuff happening.
Yeah, you can
It's
fill
set in
that
the
all
early
in.
40s, so
Yeah.
World War II is going on, and there's mentions of like the Nazis and that kind of stuff, but that's not the primary focus of the book. So I did not have to do like war research and that kind of stuff. It was just sort of like known that this was the time period, and you could kind of put the pieces together just by reading all the other gazillion World War II books.
Absolutely. I actually really like that about it. It was like a breath of fresh air for World War II era, because it wasn't the battle scenes, it wasn't anything like that, but the tensions were still there.
Yes.
And the the checkpoints and things like that. Those are reality. So interesting. Okay, I can see where you went with that. That's interesting. So the other novel of yours that I read recently was your latest release, Best Years of Your Life, and it is a contemporary novel set in a college town featuring some tumultuous topics and questionable decisions. The characters make a lot of questionable decisions. But I was first wondering, why the switch to contemporary?
I never really had a goal in mind when I started writing. I never was like, I'm going to be this, or I'm going to do this type of book all the time. The stories kind of came to me, and, I know that it's super important in publishing to really brand yourself as an author. And I totally get that and value that. But I also, as an indie, I kind of wanted to like, just do my thing, like out the get-go, and write what came to me, write what spoke to me. So that's what I did. And the idea for Best Years of Your Life struck me hard as my background in higher ed. So I spent 11 years teaching at university, and so I used a lot of my experiences there for the setting and just campus life and faculty dynamics and those sorts of things. So it was really easy to pull that story together. And when I was writing it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. It's very different than historical, and I love historical. But I think that I'm probably going to stay in the contemporary realm for the near future.
Do you think so? Yeah. You do both really, really well, that's a talent on its own, because it's difficult to switch between those two genres. So it was very immersive. And again, one you don't want to put down, because you can judge them all you want, but you still want to know what they do.
Yes.
Like it's that immersive. So I don't actually read a lot of contemporary fiction, but reading yours has made me sort of open that door a little wider, because I want to explore some of the things that I struggle with in contemporary fiction are probably more tropes than anything. And I think women's fiction is less tropey. So I'm not it has to be happily ever after. So.
No, I am not at all. And I don't want to like give, the endings away, but I very much dislike endings where everything comes together with a pretty bow. And it's just, to me, it's not realistic. To me, it's not real life. Like life is messy and life has consequences. And so I like a hopeful ending. I like an ending where a character, like you could see some hope on the horizon, but you're not sure, like, and not everything ends happy, So
and they can still make a poor decision.
Yes. Yep. If you make bad choices, there's going to be consequences. That's what my characters, have to face.
I love that, though, because I'm the same way. I love there's a thread of hope, but it's, there's options.
And it's appropriate for the storyline, so it's appropriate for what the characters have done, that they get this type of ending. It's not always bad. It's not always just like a depressing ending. I think I find a balance of sort of hopeful.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I agree completely, which is probably why I enjoyed it so much, because I don't do Hallmark, unfortunately.
No.
I just can't. Sorry, Hallmark lovers. I just can't.
No, I'm the same. I'm definitely not a sappy person. I'm not cheesy, that kind of stuff. And again, no, not judging anyone who is. It's just not my cup of tea. And so that's definitely not what I write.
Yeah, exactly.
I like a little bit of grit.
Yeah, I agree, because it does bring through that real life experience. And that was the interesting thing too. You talked about the college campus setting. That was so immersive. It was, and that setting really grounded me in the story, so that it allowed the characters to go off and do all their poor decision making on their own, but yet you're still grounded because of the setting. And the light bulb went off when you said that you've taught
Yes. So that was
Like,
the setting was
ah,
so easy for me to come up with. In fact, I had former students reach out to me when they heard and when I was marketing this book and stuff. And they were like, "Wait, is this about us? Is this about our school?" And it was like, "No, no, no. Like none of these things happened at the school where I taught, you know." But it's just like I spent so much time working on a campus. It was easy
yeah,
to imagine a fictional setting like
totally.
that.
Absolutely. Because it's its own world,
Yeah, and I
you know?
love college campuses. I'm very drawn to
Yeah,
campus novels. I loved dark academia, all of that. I live in a college town. Like I walk through a campus all the time. So it's just like I don't know, it just gives me like the feels. I love a setting on a college
totally.
campus.
I Yep, I agree with you there. I do too. And so that's a good question too. Did it start with the poor decisions or did it start with the college campus setting for you?
I think both because I knew that I wanted to do, and this isn't really a spoiler because it's written in the back cover copy, but basically a professor student relationship.
Mhm.
And so that's like, you know, off limits sort of thing in lots of different ways. And so then it sort of like evolved into, okay, well, what other things could be happening on the campus? And then when I knew who the main characters were going to be, it's a three female protagonists. It's two mothers and their daughter. And they're all on the campus. It was kind of like, okay, they each have their own little storyline going on, but then they all come together. And so I think I started with the faculty student relationship
Oh,
first. And
okay.
then I was sort of like, and then it evolved from there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because
Okay.
Christine is the primary character, I would say. She kind of
Yeah.
opens and closes the book. So her storyline is sort of like the primary.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. That's interesting. It's just such a natural fit, though. I think probably it's probably like just in tandem that
Yeah. Yeah,
they one goes
definitely.
with the other. That makes complete sense. So, I don't want to give too much away from because you really do need to just pick this up and read it. But how did you come to zoom in on the topic of college cheating schemes? Because that was
I think they're super fascinating. I mean, obviously having worked in higher ed and I've had my fair share of like student cheating issues as a college instructor.
really
So dealing with like the academic honesty policies and, you know, the penalties and all of that kind of stuff. I just think it's interesting in the way students' minds work. And so there's like a double cheating storyline in this book,
yes,
right? So you've
yeah.
got the one mom professor who's having an affair with a student, which is obviously cheating in one sense. But then you have the daughter who's desperate to be part of the cool crowd. She's sort of a loner. And it's like, how can I get in with like, you know, the cool kids? And so when she's approached by like the it girl on campus who wants her to steal exams from her mom's computer, she's like, sees that as her opportunity to get in with them. And so bad decisions, bad decisions, bad decisions.
Yeah.
And then you've got this tandem like cheating situation going, and then they merge in a very catastrophic way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, even just you saying that, I get chills, but
It was fun to write.
I
It was fun. It's fun to write that
bet.
kind of that juicy, like doing bad things. I mean, I've always kind of been like the good girl and like, you know, didn't really get in trouble as a kid and that kind of stuff. So I'm writing about these characters doing these awful things and making these very morally questionable decisions. And it's fun.
Yes. Oh, I bet, yeah, absolutely. I actually when I, was writing a nasty character, I'm like, "Actually, that's kind of fun to write the nasty
Yeah.
character
But I
because
also
it's"
like it because I think it can be relatable for people who are reading. They're not gonna sit there and go like, "Oh, I would have done the same thing," but they could
No.
see how the characters made those decisions. Even though they're
Yes.
bad and they're wrong, you
Yes.
understand, like, the humanity behind it and what's driving them and their motivations.
Exactly. If you give them a reason to, they could
Yes.
reason it out and see it, and it's also true that we probably have all run into somebody who is like that,
Right.
right? Somebody who
Yeah.
has
I
less
like books that give you a lot of, like, what if questions, like, "What would
yes.
I do? What would I do if I were in this situation?"
Yes, because that's how when we know better, we do better. So
Exactly.
it's if we expose ourselves to those situations through fiction, we can sort of guesstimate how we would respond.
Mhm.
So, and this is a great little tagline too. cheaters don't fall far from the
I
tree.
love I love a good tagline.
That's
And so
awesome.
I just thought that one was like so appropriate because it's a mother-daughter and they both have these, secrets that they're
Exactly.
hiding.
It's a really good tagline, and that literally drew me in. So you are good at titles and taglines, yeah.
Well, thank you.
So, since you've done both historical and contemporary, how does the research and approach for writing a story, does it differ at all between the two, or is it pretty similar for you?
I would say I definitely did more research on the historical just because I had to. It's set
Mhm.
in a completely different country, time
Right.
period, all of that. Whereas the contemporary one felt so close to what I had lived in terms of setting. It was very easy. I didn't need to do any research into like, well, what does a college look like? And where are the classrooms and where are the faculty offices? Like I know all of that. So I could come up with that very easily. So I definitely think historical has more research elements, and maybe takes a little bit more time in that planning phase to get all
Yeah.
those because you want it to be accurate.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and you end up still going down a rabbit hole
Oh yeah.
as you write because you're like, "Wait, did they do this?
Oh
Did they
yeah.
have access to that at this time in
Oh,
this
and there were
location?"
things that I want to say either beta readers or critique partners like definitely picked up from that,
Mhm.
where I can't think of specifics, but saying like, wait, this wasn't even invented yet, like in the
Right?
1940s, or
Yeah.
just little things like that. And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. Oh my gosh, like they were critical in pointing a few of those things out.
Which is helpful, because
Hmm.
even etymology, even the terminology alone,
Yes,
that certain words weren't used in a specific way that you intend to use
exactly.
them, and, yeah, it's interesting.
And
Etymology is all
historical
over the
fiction
place.
readers they know their stuff,
They do.
and they will flag that right away if they catch you in something that
Yes.
doesn't make sense. So I tried to be very conscious of that.
It's true. I have, in one book I mentioned, the VW Beetle,
Yeah.
and I purposely put it in because it of the symbolism between, because that was sort of one of Hitler's big things that his invention, didn't really invent it, but, he liked the technology of it,
Right.
and, I brought it into the States a year before it actually came in the story, and somebody was like, "Hang on a second."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I do kn you just have to read the author notes because I
Yeah.
do say it.
I know.
I
And
promise,
then
I do."
it gets tricky because so much of writing fiction is a suspension of belief where you're just kind of like, you have to just enjoy the story for what it is. But
Yeah,
when it comes to historical, I don't know, it's a little trickier because you want it
it
to be
is.
accurate.
Exactly. It's a little bit finer line,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, exactly. Although, when I tried to write a contemporary, um, side of a story, I was getting bogged down in the, cell phones. In
Oh,
the
yeah.
wait, which cell phone era were we in then?
Oh, yeah. I've
And
I've done Google searches for, like, what was the cell phone in 2005 and, like, that
right.
kind of stuff, or what social
Yeah.
media platform, when was it MySpace, when was it Facebook,
Yes.
like, Yeah.
That's exactly that, and I found that to be more frustrating for me than, finding out if there was a
Yeah.
toaster in 1920.
It
So
because the historical stuff is it's very clean cut. It's like there's
yes,
only one iteration of something,
that's
versus
right.
now
Yeah,
there's how many different types of phones and all that. So it does get tricky.
it does, and you just at some point, you have to just go with one
Yeah,
and, you know, and not use name brands.
totally.
That's pretty much what it works out to. So, we're always looking for our next great read. So can you tell us what's up for you next? What can we look forward to? You said something's coming in September. Was that
I'm polishing up my next novel. It's contemporary and it is very much like in the same feels of emotional, suspenseful women's fiction drama. So there's good people making bad choices and then what happens and all that kind of fun stuff. So I think it falls very nicely after Best Years of Your Life. It's not a sequel, but it just like goes very nicely for that type of reader. And hoping that September is looking like it's going to be the pub date,
nice?
and then it'll be on to the next.
Yes. There's always another idea, always another
Yes,
story.
always.
So we should I'm going to put your website back up here. Do you have a newsletter that people can join to?
I do have a newsletter. I'm not great at sending it out, I will admit. I definitely won't spam you with a newsletter every week, but whenever I have news to share or any sort of sneak peeks or giveaways or anything, then I definitely send something out. So you can sign up on my website, jencraven.com. And if you're interested in following along, I'm most active on Instagram. That's where I post a lot and share book stuff and thoughts on writing and all of that kind of fun stuff.
And some really hilarious videos.
I do have fun with videos, and I try to make them light and funny and relatable because, you can't take yourself too seriously.
Totally. My favorite is the this is what I think I look like when I'm writing, and this is what I actually look like when I'm writing.
I mean, it's so true, right?
Yes. It's so true. If readers only knew that I really only put makeup on when I come on here.
Oh, I know. Trust me.
The way it goes. It's usually, ponytails and leggings. So
You're not
I totally get that. It's comfort first, right? Yeah. So the last question we have for you today is, I'm always interested in what readers or what authors are reading. What are you currently reading, or what is the last great book you read that you're telling all your book loving friends about?
Well, I do a monthly roundup on Instagram. So if you follow me, you'll see what I've read for each month, and I always highlight some of my favorites. Currently reading actually a manuscript for one of my author friends. So that's going to be, I think, coming out in 2024, but it's wonderful. But the last book that I read that I really enjoyed this past month, I read Black Cake. It was one of like the big book club circulations, and I thought that one was really great. I loved that. It's sort of historical, but also it's like a dual timeline.
Okay.
And contemporary. And then I also read Notes on an Execution, and that one's contemporary. Wow. It's very dark. So if you don't like kind of dark stuff, it's following a man who's on death row and the countdown to his execution. So, but so two very different picks there, but
very different.
Them a lot.
Oh, interesting. I've seen Black Cake around, and I thought, that's one. It's interesting that the cover is so different than what I'm used to picking up.
To the cover. It was I thought it was really good.
Okay. I will add that to the growing list.
Add it to your list.
So sad. The list is towering, but well, thank you so much for joining us today. That was great. It was always good to learn more about the authors that are behind these books.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Your life. This is a good one. It literally will just be up till 3 a.m. reading. I can vouch for that.
That's what all my readers said. It's a quick read, fast pace, and they just wanted to keep flipping the pages, which is great to hear.
Absolutely. And Kate is saying thank you. I look forward to reading your books.
So awesome. Thanks, Kate.
I hope that you grab a copy of those, and trying to find my other buttons here while I talk, and it's not working. But thank you so much for joining us, Jen. It was a real pleasure. And grab a book, friends, and settle in for the weekend.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.